Kyle here from All Media Reviews, here to do albums of the year 1986, rough draft. One record I didn't show from '85 though. I did, in looking for some of this stuff, I did find my wife's copy of No Jacket Required. So a lot of the stuff I have, or she has, we have in our house. And then of course there's stuff that we don't have, we used to have. But so I'm just gonna get to it and go as fast as I can. I can say that a lot of the albums from the 80s, though, a lot of them are about the songs, not the full albums. They're not favorites of mine, even among my favorite bands, which is just weird. But anyway, some albums that are on the list I've stuck some albums on the list, of course, that I only know a few songs from, but the ones that are not on the list that it's the same thing, like Talk Talk's The Color of Spring. It's the second Talk Talk album before they still went into post-rock. David and David, of course, David Burwald later would play with Kevin Gilbert, but the album Boomtown, Welcome to the Boomtown. I've spent some time listening to it, but wasn't really won over by it, but I still probably need to go back to it. Bruce Hornsby and The Range, The Way It Is, the album, the title track, of course, was his most well-known song everywhere on like Light FM and soft rock or whatever. World Party's Private Revolution. They're a band that I need to check more. I've seen some of the videos from Jake Root on Transmission on Twitch, over the last X years, watching during COVID. Cameo's Word Up, of course, the title track of that is well known. Europe's The Final Countdown, again, no title track. And Slayer's Rain and Blood. So, alright, moving on to the list. This is an album that I really don't like very much. There's like one track on it, but as a whole, it was one of them. It kind of hit me that he's definitely the one of the most hit and miss artists, and it's really about his group versus his individuals. Pat Metheny and Ornette Coleman's Song X. Very avant-garde free jazz that I was just like, it really kind of showed me, like, this is what Pat Metheny does. Sometimes what Pat Metheny does other times, so. Anyway, number 31. Number 30. Can't find my wife's copy, but Madonna's True Blue, which Patrick Leonard, of Toy Matinee, of course, did work on. Maybe the first one he worked on. This has Papa Don't Preach, Live to Tell, Open Your Heart, Isla Bonita. A lot of her, again, like many pop artists, Madonna specifically of that era, there was just song after song got on the radio, but you just know them. They're still good pop songs. Alright, so the first one I have a physical copy of. This is a compilation. I probably could rate it higher, but I'm just not that high on compilations. I stick them on here just for nostalgia. But it's The Police, Every Breath You Take. The most notable track in here, and there's some other exceptions, I can't remember, but it does have Don't Stand So Close to Me 86, which is like a version that's much slower. My friend, when I was in high school, did not like the version on here at all. He liked the standard version that's on, I think it's Outlandish Day More. I can't remember which record I should know the Police catalog. I have to listen to it. But anyway, it's got a lot of their best songs. There's some songs that are on it, but, it has Wrapped Around Your Finger. It has Message in a Bottle. It has Spirits of the Material World, among my favorites. Anyway, it's after the Police had ended, but of course, this was one of the most circulated compilations, especially in the early 90s. I think I might have got this from BMG, actually, so... the club that you sign up, for $1, for not $10, you get for a penny a month or whatever, you get an album. The whole conspiracy. Anyway, number 28, I got Bon Jovi album Slippery When Wet, which has Living on a Prayer. You Give Love a Bad Name. Those are the. I never hated Bon Jovi. I never loved I just kind of think they're okay. I did kind of have a little bit of a thing for Bon Jovi in the 90s when I was really following the WTA tenor, and Martina Hingis specifically. All these players, like tennis players on the WTA, the women's tennis tour, loved Bon Jovi. It's like, well, I may as well start listening to more Bon Jovi. So I bought this, but it's okay. I'm not, Bon Jovi's not the worst band ever, but again, they're certain songs have been way overplayed, like, Living on a Prayer, of course, specifically. The best thing that if you see from Living on a Prayer is that this guy from Boston Celtics fan who was doing this thing where he's walking on the fans lip syncing to it. It's hilarious, but I like some of the stuff that Bon Jovi did later, or was it John Bon Jovi specifically, the Young Guns soundtrack, and I don't know. It's as a guilty pleasure Bon Jovi. There are much better bands doing a similar style, but also much worse. So anyway, Bon Jovi. Number 27, the Bangles' Different Light, which has two notable, especially notable songs, Manic Monday and Walk Like an Egyptian. Everyone knows those two songs. Of course, Manic Monday was written by Prince. Number 26, I have this compact disc, Boston's long-awaited third album, Third Stage, which most well-known for the single Amanda, which has some great harmonies. It's very poppy. Cool the Engines, We're Ready. I mean, it's not as good as their first two records, but it's still decent. It has the Boston sound. It's just it had waited so long. It was weird. I know people that love Boston. It's like, when is their record going to come out? I kind of relate to them with like Pepe Deluxe and Dredge and all these bands who've been waiting for a new album. It was 8 years since 78's Don't Look Back. But anyway, Third Stage from Boston. You had Barry Goodrow put out a solo on which Bride Delp sang on, but Boston's number 26, Boston's Third Stage. Number 25. I had at one point on cassette, I don't know where it is, but the soundtrack to Top Gun, of course. Soundtracks were really a big deal in the 80s especially, but includes, of course, Kenny Loggins' the two songs Danger Zone and Playing with the Boys, which I'm not remembering that one as quite as well. But it also has Berlin's Take My Breath Away, which was everywhere for a few years there. Tina Marie, Miami Sound Machine, Cheap Trick. It has a lot of great players on it. It was a soundtrack that a lot of people have. I mean, Danger Zone, my friend Christian was saying that song actually has had more streams than Footloose, which is surprising, but I can believe it. It was, he had that. He had, what was it, Footloose was the year before, 2 years before, something like that. Anyway, the Top Gun soundtrack, not the last soundtrack on this list, but number 25. Number 24, Billy Joel, thanks to my wife's copy, The Bridge, which, Billy Joel, I haven't included every Billy Joel in this whole series. That's why these are rough drafts, but this has A Matter of Trust, and this is the Time. It's okay. I mean, A Matter of Trust was the big hit on here. Running on Ice is okay, but comparably, this isn't nearly as good as some of his other records. But it's okay. Number 24. Otherwise, it would have been higher. But it's a little more light. It sounds like that late 80s, like soft piano rock. Really, I mean, the songwriting isn't quite as strong on a lot of it. Number 24. Number 23. So I just like live albums and compilations. I have the box set from Bruce Springsteen, 75 to 85 live Bruce Springsteen and the E Street Band technically, and it's got a lot on it. I mean, it's not a record, it's not a release that I've listened to a ton just because I got to be in the mood to listen to live Springsteen. It's been a long time since I've heard it, but it does include. I think it does. Does it have Jungle Land? I can't remember. That was maybe part of my motivation. Is that did it have? I ended up getting a bootleg from '78 that had Jungle Land on it, but. It has still a lot of the Rosalita, Badlands, Because the Night. It does have Candy's Room from '81. It's got a bunch of different shows. So, I mean, if you're into live recordings of Springsteen, people love Springsteen. You've got to be there. I saw him one time. But, I mean, this does capture a lot of what the E Street Band was like live and just the energy and the sort of, epic nature of a lot of their shows. Yeah, the big box set that a lot of people had. I never got it on vinyl, but back in the summer of '95, I was getting everything from Springsteen. I had to get this. So that's number 23, if I'm keeping track here. Number 22, Duran Duran's Notorious. Really known for the title track. I mean, the thing I just remember most about is when that album came out, my brother, who was a much bigger Duran Duran fan, did not like it. That song, the title track, was being played a lot. After two of the guys had done Power Station, and then there was another project for Simon Le Bon, I can't remember, but they took a break in effect for a couple of years. But Meet El Presidente was the other single, or like the President's Suite or something like that. But anyway, that's at 22. Again, that could move up and down depending on if I ever do this again. Number 21, Prince's Parade, music from the motion picture of Under the Cherry Moon, which has Kiss. It's most well known for Kiss. I listened to some of it the other day, and it's okay. Again, between that and Around the World in 80 Days, I think it's maybe slightly better. But I mean, it doesn't have. I think Pop Life and Raspberry Beret were bigger, but it's more. One description was very bohemian. But I mean, let me just glance at my Spotify list, what I did mark down for it. A song called Mountains, and then Another Lover, Holy in Your Head. those are the ones that made my playlist. So anyway, it'd be higher if it was better. I mean, it's better than the movie. I know people hated the movie. Now, Graffiti Bridge is the next one. I don't know if they did a soundtrack for that, but I'm going to be talking about Sign of the Times, though, I think on the 87 list. I think it was 87. So I have better expectations for Sign of the Times. Number 20, the Beastie Boys' License to Ill, which features Fight for the Right to Party and Paul Revere. There were a couple others. This was an album that I know a lot of my friends in school were totally into, so it was almost impossible to avoid. But at the same time, I don't listen to it. I haven't listened to it in ages. But yeah, No Sleep Till Brooklyn was one of the other hits on it, and Brass Monkeys. So I mean, I think it was their debut album. It had a few standards. Paul Revere to me is the biggest gem on here. The lyrics, I can still recite a lot of that. Running around with a baseball hat, the air's getting hot, the beer's getting fat. One lonely beastie I be, all by myself without nobody. Anyway, early rap, I actually like a lot of early rap, some early rap, and so the Beastie Boys were no exception. Number 20. Number 19, Paul Simon's Graceland. Mostly known for like 2 or 3 singles. It's Call Me Al. That's maybe his most well-known song. Diamonds and Boy in the Bubble. I'm kind of underwhelmed by it. That whole like sort of African influence. A lot of it is still just Simon doing very light, stripped-down folk songs. He's using some interesting rhythms, but ultimately I kind of got lost in it. You know, I haven't listened to it in age. My brother loved it. I know he had it. He used to play it sometimes. But anyway, number 19. Number 18, Eddie Money's Can't Hold Back, which features 3 of his hits. Take Me Home Tonight, which includes the services of Ronnie Spector, the late Ronnie Spector, of course. I Want to Go Back, and I Can't Hold Back. Now, this does not have the services of Kevin Gilbert, except Kevin Gilbert at the time, right after that, did tour with Eddie, and then played on the next record. But anyway, number 18, Eddie Money's Can't Hold Back. Probably his biggest record, actually, from a pop standpoint. Number 17, okay, so this is, I can't find my wife's copy. I don't know if I think she hasn't, but this is the remixes. This is Janet Jackson. It's for Janet Jackson's album Control. This is the remix vinyl, but it has a bunch of her, you know, it wasn't her debut album. She had an album before this, but this is the album that she worked with Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis, and it had a bunch of hits, and the follow-up did too, of course. Control, What Have You Done for Me Lately, Nasty, When I Think of You. I mean, it's filled with pop songs. So yeah, I have to put it. I like it better than the Madonna album, and I like it better than some of the other pop albums. So Janet Jackson, I think it was Rhythm Nation that had probably my favorite Janet Jackson song. What am I spacing on it? Escapade, but it still had a lot of her biggest songs. So that's number whatever that is. Number 16. Am I at number 17? Number 16. This is one as a promo I got. I don't know. I'm kind of feeling different, but Kind of Magic from Queen, which has the theme for the Highlander movie, and I guess was used in the TV series. I think of it for the TV series, the Adrian Paul TV series, but it really is like a soundtrack album for Highlander in a lot of ways, because they reference it, they put some clips in it. But as a whole, I understand the criticism for this record. It doesn't compare to the stuff from the 70s. It doesn't even compare to the game, really. But, was it Don't Lose Your Head? I forget the other one that's... One Vision. One Vision was the other sort of pop song on here besides Princess of the Universe. But, yeah, I mean, it's Queen. It's still Queen. I'd still rather listen to it than a lot like the Bon Jovi record. But as a whole, I'm not as into it as many of their other Queen records, and that's why it was higher up originally on my list. So... at number 16. Number 15, Iron Maiden Somewhere in Time. You know, and again, I'm not as familiar with a lot of the Iron Maiden catalog, but the 80s stuff is sort of sacred ground and essential. Songs like Wasted Years, Deja Vu. Deja Vu is super catchy, and Alexander the Great stand out among others. I don't think I like it as much as Power Slave or Number of the Beast, but it still has enough. I mean, it's the sort of Iron Maiden sound still exists, but it varies enough. I'm not... Again, my feeling about Bruce Dickinson doesn't change on that. They use some keyboards on this. I know in the next one they use more. Seventh Son of the Seventh Son. So I'll have to talk about that when it comes up. So number 15. Number 14, we see Genesis, Invisible Touch. Of course, their pop peak, which had like 5 top 10 singles, including 3 or 4 number ones. Tonight, 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 not the short or the long, the title track. Land of Confusion I've always liked. In Too Deep sounds like a Phil Collins song, of course. Throwing It All Away also does, but it's kind of epic. Domino and the Brazilian. Yeah, it's, to me, this is, I mean, they change sound a lot, of course. This doesn't resemble even the late 70s or even Duke at that much, but in some ways it works still, even though a lot of these songs got big. I don't like it as much, obviously, as the Gabriel stuff or the 70s post-Gabriel stuff, but I still like it. I think from the 80s, it's probably after Duke my second favorite Genesis, and my second favorite Genesis basically after Duke. So it kind of, in some ways, it's kind of justified how popular and big it got, and it kind of made their career. Unfortunately, the fact that they're known for it is probably the only issue I have with it. So that's number 14. Number 13, we see Robert Fripp and the League of Crafty Guitarists live, which is not on Spotify, by the way, but it is on YouTube. Mostly, I think I like the thing on this I like the most is the March Suite. Like the beginning, the first few tracks, the last couple tracks. When he's doing the guitar craft in chorus with several guitarists at once, it sounds pristine. Some of this kind of meanders though, so it's not a perfect record. Some of the other guitar craft or Frippertronic albums I'm going to probably include at some point. I probably could be more into, but I like this more than the last one I had on there. You know, I haven't heard Exposure, but anyway, number 13 rather. Number 12, the Stand By Me soundtrack, which I had as a kid. I have probably on a cassette tape, probably in my basement. I played the hell out of this. I just forgot about it until today. It has a ton of late 50s, sort of early rock and roll standards. Buddy Holly's Every Day. Let's see here. Come and Go With Me from the Del Vikings. Yakety Yak. Get a Job. Great Balls of Fire. Mr. Lee. My friends and I memorized this album when I was a kid. I loved it. I played this. I'm 9 or 10 years old. Stand By Me came out in '86. And we're listening to music from the late 50s. I started listening to oldies radio at that time and early rock and roll. I wasn't listening to, prog or even as much 80s pop. I had a period of time where I loved the oldies, and this was one of my along with Weird Al and Purple Rain and Thriller, was like one of the most played cassette tapes when I was a kid. So number 12 is the Stand By Me soundtrack, and one of my favorite movies. When I do the 86 movies, I'm sure it'll be pretty high. So number 11, Megadeth's Peace Sells, But Who's Buying, the second album from Megadeth, which has my last words is probably my favorite part, but Peace Sells and the Good Morning Black Friday Suite. I'm looking for the Dave Mustaine humor vocals, and I'm finding them on some of these songs, and I'm liking it. I'll have to go through some of the other Megadeth records and include those. But yeah, the thing I'm actually the most impressed, the remaster that's on Spotify sounds really good. Compare that to the first two Metallica albums, and it's like night and day. Really, really well remastered production on that. So number 10, Huey Lewis and the News is 4, his fourth album, the Gulf 4. I had this, of course, so this was my first Huey Lewis tape, but I've got a bunch of Huey Lewis tapes right over here. And I don't have that one. I've got where is it? Picture This and the News and the sports record, but it, of course, includes Hip to Be Square, Stuck With You, Jacob's Ladder, Doing It All For My Baby. Love Huey Lewis, super nostalgia, just like the Stand By Me soundtrack. I still love those songs, even though they're from my youth, from my real young youth. Number 9, the debut album from Florida Zone, one of the other bands from Florida, doing the sort of early kind of it's early sort of prog power metal. Crimson Glory's debut album, self-titled debut album. Valhalla, Dragon Lady, Heart of Steel, Azrael. I always think of the Smurfs, Azrael. Queen of the Masquerade. It's interesting, on Spotify, the track list is in a different order, but not their best record, but still an impressive debut album that was, it had the 80s sort of screechy falsetto vocals from Midnight. The singer's name is Midnight. They wore the masks. They had a very unique kind of image and aesthetic in their sound. I mean, they sounded a little like queensryche, but they were different in some ways. They were kind of almost more chaotic in some way. They were, I don't know, and it was prog, but it wasn't like Fate's Warning. It wasn't like I said, it was kind of a slightly different take on prog and using a little power metal in there. And then influenced by new wave of British heavy metal. They probably were fans of Savatage, because Savatage was from the same place in Florida, the same state, and it just come out a couple of years before that. So anyway, Crimson Glory's debut album, the self-titled number 9 from Crimson Glory. Number 8, speaking of Queensryche, the third would be their second proper album. I think it was their third release, and I love this, the self-titled album. Rage for Order, which has a massive glam element. You look at the photos and what the band were wearing, especially Jeff Tate. I like a lot of this, although I always felt like I wanted to like this album more because it's really praised by a lot of people. But it has, like, Walk in the Shadows, I Dream in Infrared, Gonna Get Close to You is a cover, but their version, they did a video for it, kind of like a stalker type. Surgical Strike, New Regale, London, and Screaming in Digital, I Will Remember. There aren't too many bad songs. I like this more than The Warning, their debut album, Warning rather. But as a whole, I have not given this nearly as much mileage. Among the first 3 releases, it's the EP, then this, then Warning. Then we get into, of course, Mindcrime, which comes next, a couple years. But yeah, I've always liked this album, but I've never been won over. But I like this more than any of the sort of post Promised Land records, other than maybe 1 or 2. I mean, I would put it ahead of any of those in a heartbeat. So let's see here. Any like the Decarm. I don't know if I'd put it ahead of. I don't know. Here in Our Front Tree, I still have a soft spot for it to some degree, but the DeGarmo records, at least the post DeGarmo records. Number 7, we have a live EP, and again, because of the favorite band factor, it's this high. It's the Marillion EP Brief Encounter, which does not actually include anything from Misplaced Childhood, which is interesting, but it has the title track for Script of Just a Tear and the title track for Fugazi, so it's got 2 of their best early songs live. I think I like this a little more than Reel to Reel. Lady Nina and well, it does have Kaylee. My bad. It does have the 1 track from there's token track, but it's just an EP. But again, it's just because it has to go in here somewhere because it's Marillion, and I'm gonna have a favoritism for it. So number 7, A Brief Encounter from Marillion. Number 6. The first Van Hagar album, 5150, and the best Van Hagar album for my money. The title track is my favorite track on here. I've always loved that track. But Dreams, while it's gotten a lot of radio play, I still love. Why Can't This Be Love? The synthesizers really are a big focus of this, but they work. They're very tastefully written. Best of Both Worlds. Sammy sounds really good. Summer Nights is another good track on here. Yeah, I mean, I've always had a soft spot. When I got into Van Halen, it's like, oh, Sammy Hagar is not too bad. And, 5150, I just love that riff. The energy on that track is fantastic. So, number 6. Number 5, Master of Puppets from Metallica, an album I've basically only listened to for about 20 years. When Dream Theater covered it, I had to check it out. The title track is fantastic. Some people think it's the best song they ever did, the best song ever, and I can totally understand that, even though the lyrics are kind of in your face, but Disposable Heroes, the line, "You will die when I say," I know it's about like a military thing, but I found that comical. Orion, of course, the instrumental that was very driven by the late Cliff Burton. Damage Incorporated, which I think is much for the Dream Theater when they covered that with Barney Greenway from Napalm Death, but that's great. Battery. There's a lot of great tracks on here, although I'll say that a lot of Kirk's solos are very similar. Like, I could hear 2 or 3 of them back to back, and I wouldn't distinguish them that well. But it's a step up in some ways from Ride the Lightning, although I don't know from a songwriting standpoint, they're pretty close. But push comes to shove, I still would probably lean slightly to Master of Puppets. So number 4, that was number 5. Number 4, Peter Gabriel's So. Well, I did listen to this last week, and it's got the most well-known songs: In Your Eyes, Red Rain, Sledgehammer, of course, and Big Time. Red Rain I still love. In Your Eyes is fine. It's been played to death by, adult contemporary radio and in your dentist shop and your doctor's office and your drugstore. But, and of course it was used in, was the John Cusack movie, Say Anything. Mercy Street is okay. Don't Give Up, that's with Kate Bush. I think the rest of this record is kind of okay. That's why, I don't consider this my favorite Gabriel record. I still think it's good. I look at it a little bit like Moving Pictures in that I understand why it's the most iconic and most well-known, but I also don't find that I'm attached to it because I've heard it and I kind of know there's other music I like more. But still, for 1986, it still ends up number 4. Number 3, I wanted to revisit more of this, but I didn't get around to it. This is, in effect, the debut album from Eric Johnson. Guitarist from Texas. Originally had a band called Electromatics from the 70s, which I have the CD, and I don't know what happened to it. I have the booklets, though, or the jewel case. But that was jazz fusion in the 70s. But anyway, Eric Johnson, who later would be on G3, opened for Rush at one point. But this is his debut album, Tones, which features, many good tracks, some with and some without vocals, like Emerald Eyes, Trail of Tears. It's very happy, almost too happy at some point, but, it sounds kind of, I wouldn't call it saccharine. There's a lot of stuff from the 80s, jazzy kind of stuff, instrumental stuff that sounds saccharine to me. It kind of skates the line, and I think it pulls it off. I remember I got into this because there's enough of a blues guitar element. It's almost like Stevie Ray Vaughan, but less gritty and more polished. I mean, it's not as clean as Pat Metheny's jazz stuff, but it's sort of somewhere in the middle there. But, I mean, it's less is more. When I got into Eric Johnson a little bit, I heard he'd open for Rush. This was the album I liked the most. Although I like the two records that follow this a lot, too. But anyway, this is Eric Johnson's Tones, number 3. Number 2... XTC's Skylarking. Not my favorite XTC album, but like So from Peter Gabriel, like Moving Pictures from Rush. I understand why it's sort of the most iconic and most sort of known record, because it has Dear God, it has Dear God, and I think actually that's really Supergirl is maybe the second most known song on this album. They work with Todd Rundgren, of course, a lot of the pop sensibility that Rundgren brought to them. I mean, I know they were, butting heads, Andy Partridge and Todd Rundgren on this. Grass is another good track. I listened to this, The Meeting Place, that's another one I can't get out of my head. It's a earworm. I listened to this last week again, and it's been a while since I've listened to Skylarking, and I gotta say that while it's not my favorite, it's kind of hit and miss. The best songs are very good. Season Cycle, Mermaid Smile, there's a couple more I added to my playlist last week. Ballet for a Rainy Day. So, I mean, it's still the album I still think of XTC most for, and the most sort of suggestible album, although I don't know. Oranges and Lemons is so damn good, though. But anyway, number 2, and of course, number 1, kind of for fandom to some degree, and the last John Arch Fates Warning album, Awaken the Guardian. As I said before, it's not my favorite John Arch Fates Warning album, but I still love it, and I'm a massive fanboy. It features, my favorite track actually on here is Fata Morgana. Soundscape kind of solidified that when they did their cover with the synthesizers, but that's a super energetic earworm. Guardian is a great epic. Prelude to Ruin is fantastic. It's epic in some ways too. The Source is Valerie, the Dolls. Exodus is their first sort of, their second epic. They followed up, they had Epitaph on Spectre Within. I still like Exodus, and of course this is the first album with Frank Aresti because Victor Arduini had left. I think he had a lot to do with Exodus from reading the book. Giants lore, I mean it's got a lot of sort of fantasy lyrics, a lot of tones, and it distinguishes itself from the new wave of British heavy metal to an extent. I mean, I still think they did it with Spectre, but I mean, it's more so, there's more colors, more textures, more craft. This doesn't sound like an Iron Maiden album. And John Arch kind of was sort of peaking in his sort of vocal abilities and lyrical abilities at this point. Unfortunately, it kind of caught up with him, and he really wasn't meant to be long-term with the band, although thankfully he would later work with John Arch. He later auditioned for Dream Theater, but with Jim Bethea, rather. But yeah, I mean, it's a metal classic. If you've never heard it, if you've never heard the early Fates Warning, it's still the most recommended, even though, again, I lean toward Spectre Within. It's still iconic to some degree from a standpoint of metal history, from Fates Warning's history, from Metal Blade's history, and it's an album I still like. I mean, I guess you could say from beginning to end, the album kind of works better than the sum of its parts, even compared to Spectre Within. Now, I'd say that the Ray Alder stuff, I would argue, topped it in some ways, although the style changed. That totally, from No Exit, then to Perfect Symmetry, to Parallels, there's a dramatic difference. If you listen, they don't sound like the same band at all. And I think Frank Aresti had a lot to do with it, what Jim Matheos was doing, and of course, Ray Alder's vocals and some of the a lot of the different elements they brought in. But yeah, Awaken the Guardian, number 1 record from 1986. So, what are your top records from 1986? What did I miss? I'm sure I missed tons of records, but thank you for watching. 1987 hopefully will come sooner than later because it's been over almost 2 weeks since I've done one of these. But I do think as we get along here, and if I can continue to do this in the 90s, there will be more albums that I won't have to sort of review and insert in here. And I just, because it's becoming more and more familiar with a lot of this stuff. But yeah, I'm looking forward to doing some of these 87, 80, 88s. The top 5 or 6 are just staples in my playlist over the last 30 plus years. So 30 years, 25 years maybe. Anyway, but thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.